They don't teach you this in school, and most politicians would rather swallow glass than admit it out loud. But America's $37 trillion debt was never meant to be paid back. Not now, not ever. It grew too big, too fast, and for too long. And somewhere along the way, Washington quietly stopped trying to solve it and started trying to survive it. If you've ever wondered why every election sounds the same, we'll cut waste, we'll tax the rich, we'll balance the budget someday, it's because the real truth is too scary to say. Balancing the budget isn't politically difficult. It's mathematically impossible. The debt grows faster than the economy, faster than tax collections, faster than any plan to slow it down. It's like trying to empty a sinking ship with a coffee mug. And the part nobody sees, the part hidden behind government press conferences and economic forecasts, is that the interest alone is killing them. Every year, the US pays more just on interest than it spends on veterans, education, or infrastructure. Soon, it'll be more than the entire defense budget. Imagine owing so much money that your interest bill becomes bigger than your biggest national priorities. That's where America is now. That's why insiders panic while the public scrolls through TikTok. Here's the uncomfortable math Washington won't put on a billboard. Once a country's debt gets too large, the options disappear. You can't raise taxes enough because the economy slows down. You can't cut spending enough because the public revolts. You can't default because the global system collapses. And you can't grow out of it because the debt grows faster than the growth. So what do you do when a problem is too big to fix? You hide the fix. For years, policymakers inside the Treasury and the Federal Reserve have known the truth. The only way out is through the invisible door devaluation. Not the dramatic kind that crashes markets or sends people running to the banks, but the slow, quiet kind that doesn't feel like a crisis. The kind where the dollar loses value one small step at a time. And most people don't even notice. But here's the twist. This time, they're not just printing money, they're building a new architecture around it, a digital financial system designed to mask the inflation, speed up the transactions, and give them more control over how money flows. It's a plan that blends old school financial survival with a futuristic makeover. A system where losses can be hidden behind innovation and where a revalued asset can magically shrink a $37 trillion mountain into something that looks manageable. Most Americans think crypto and gold live outside government, that they're alternatives, rebellions, escape routes. But officials see something different. They see tools. They see levers. They see assets that, if valued correctly, can erase debt without ever asking voters for sacrifice. This chapter is where the curtain lifts. The truth is simple. America's debt problem isn't a story of bad math. It's a story of quiet design. And the next chapters reveal how Washington plans to delete the biggest debt in human history without ever saying the word delete. 1. Every family knows what debt feels like. The bills pile up, the interest grows, the deadlines get louder, and at some point, you run out of money, run out of options, and reality knocks on the door. That's how debt works for households. But that's not how it works for governments. Not even close. A family has to earn its way out. A government can rewrite the rules. This is the part most people never learn, the thing that separates personal finance from national finance. When you owe money, you need more income. When a country owes money, it needs more currency. And because the government controls the currency, it can shift the entire game without anyone's permission. This is why Washington never panics the way ordinary people do. You can lose your house, they can change the definition of money. Throughout history, every major empire that drowned in debt used the same escape hatch. They devalued their own currency. Rome clipped its coins, Britain stretched the gold standard until it snapped, France printed until paper was worth less than firewood. None of them paid back what they owed. They paid it down with weaker money. That's how empires reset. Not with an announcement, not with a vote, but with a silent rewrite of value. America is not new to this playbook either. In 1933, the US government didn't default. It simply changed the price of gold from $20.67 to $35 overnight. In one move, it reduced its real debt burden without touching a single dollar of principal. No riots, no collapse, no headlines saying we devalued the currency today. Just a quiet shift in the numbers that rewrote economic reality. This is the superpower households don't have. You can't wake up tomorrow and decide your paycheck is worth 40% more. But governments can, and they do. And this is where the modern story takes a turn. Because while people think crypto and gold exist outside the system, rivals to the dollar, competitors in some financial rebellion, Washington sees something very different. It sees instruments of revaluation. It sees assets whose prices can be moved, managed, and used as counterweights against impossible debt. Crypto feels like an escape route. Gold feels like a safe haven. But inside the halls of the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, they are being eyed as tools. Strategic pieces in a larger reset, a reset where the dollar doesn't collapse, but quietly transforms. The truth is simple. Governments don't pay back unpayable debt. They dilute it. They redesign the currency. They shift the weight from what they owe to what everyone else holds. And this is when you realize that America isn't trapped the way households are. It has a lever nobody else has. And it's getting ready to pull it again, this time with digital precision, global scale, and assets people never expected the government to use. In 1933, America was trapped. Banks were collapsing, unemployment was crushing the country, and the government was drowning in debt it couldn't pay. It looked like everything was about to snap. And then Franklin D. Roosevelt made a move so bold, so quiet, and so powerful that most Americans today have no idea how it saved the entire system. It started with Executive Order 6102, the law that forced every American to hand over their gold to the government. People brought in wedding rings, coins, family heirlooms, everything. The government paid them $20.67 per ounce, the official price at the time. It looked like a simple emergency measure, a temporary fix. But it wasn't temporary at all, because the moment the gold was safely in government hands, Roosevelt changed the price. Overnight, gold jumped from $20.67 to $35, a 69% increase instantly. And here's the part most people never think about. Because the government owned all the gold it had just collected, that price jump didn't make citizens richer, it made the government richer. The value of its gold reserves skyrocketed, and its debts shrank in real terms without paying back a single dollar. No riots, no chaos, no headlines screaming, "We devalued your money today!" Just a silent economic reset disguised as policy. This was the blueprint, the quiet way to erase impossible debt without admitting anything went wrong. A revaluation of assets instead of repayment. A shift in numbers instead of a sacrifice from voters. And today, the same pattern is forming again. But it won't be gold bars on kitchen tables this time. It won't be vaults full of metal. It will be digital assets, reserves, and systems built so smoothly that most people won't realize what's happening until it's already done. The 1933 playbook never died. It just evolved. And Washington is preparing to use it again. Most people think the US government is terrified of Bitcoin, that it wants to ban it, crush it, or regulate it out of existence. But the truth is far stranger. Washington isn't trying to kill Bitcoin. It's quietly collecting it. Right now, the US government already controls more than 210,000 BTC through seizures, forfeitures, and auctions that mysteriously get delayed again and again. Bills in Congress are pushing for a formal strategic Bitcoin reserve. Executive orders that were sold to the public as innovation policies were actually written to give the government more freedom to study, store, and eventually use digital assets. And if you look closely, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. They're not preparing to regulate Bitcoin, they're preparing to own it. This isn't about crypto hype or tech buzzwords. It's about power. It's about math. It's about the same escape hatch every empire eventually reaches for when the debt becomes unpayable. Because once the government has enough Bitcoin, hundreds of thousands, maybe even 1 million coins, everything changes with one announcement. Imagine the US declares Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset, similar to gold. Imagine they revalue it upward, not slowly, but officially. A single policy shift could turn a 1 million coin reserve into $1 trillion asset overnight. No taxes raised, no spending cuts, no votes lost. It's the 1933 playbook, upgraded for the digital age. Bitcoin stops being an alternative to the dollar and becomes a tool for the dollar, a pressure valve. A backdoor way to strengthen the balance sheet without ever touching the $37 trillion monster choking the system. This is why the government cares about custody tech, blockchain monitoring, exchange partnerships, and responsible innovation. These aren't guardrails, they're infrastructure, the scaffolding for a future revaluation hiding behind the language of progress. The story isn't about controlling Bitcoin's users. It's about quietly collecting the asset they plan to reprice. Most Americans don't know this, but the US government still values its gold at $42.22 an ounce, a price so outdated it might as well be from another universe. In reality, gold trades thousands of dollars higher. But on the official books, on the balance sheets that determine how strong America looks on paper, it's frozen at a number from the early 1970s. And that's not a mistake, it's a weapon. Because when you keep an asset locked at an absurdly low price, you also keep a hidden lever no one talks about. The ability to revalue it whenever the math gets ugly. If the government wakes up tomorrow and says gold is now worth $15,000 an ounce or $20,000, or whatever number fits the crisis, that single move instantly creates trillions of dollars in new value. Not by mining anything, not by earning anything, just by changing the number on the page. America's gold reserves suddenly explode upward, and the balance sheet looks stronger without a single dollar of debt being repaid. This is how quiet resets happen. Not with panic, not with speeches, but with a pen, a signature, and a new official price. But here's the part no one wants to think about. When the government gets richer through revaluation, the public gets poorer through devaluation. Because the moment gold jumps on the books, the dollar falls in reality. Your savings buy less, your paycheck stretches less, your costs rise faster than your income. It's the same trick they used in 1933, except now it hits every saver, every retiree, every person holding dollars instead of assets. Gold's second act isn't about protecting the country from collapse. It's about shifting the weight of the collapse onto ordinary people slowly enough that they don't notice. This isn't an accident. It's preparation. And the revaluation lever sits there waiting for the moment Washington decides the math can't hide anymore. There's a saying in Washington, they never put on camera, never waste a good crisis. And when you look at the calendar between 2026 and 2027, you start to see why that line matters. By then, the pressure points all stack on top of each other. The debt ceiling fights that already feel like political circus will get meaner, because the numbers are bigger and the room to pretend is smaller. Interest costs will be eating a massive chunk of the budget, crowding out everything else. Every extra bump in rates will feel like a punch to the throat of the Treasury. And in the background, the bond market, the place where the world quietly judges America's promises, will start to twitch. That's the moment when headlines turn from long-term concerns to immediate risk. A failed auction here, a ratings warning there, a sudden spike in yields that makes refinancing old debt way more expensive. To the average person, it just looks like markets being weird. To the people running the system, it looks like an opportunity, because crisis isn't an obstacle to a reset. It's the excuse. In a calm, stable year, you can't suddenly revalue gold to $15,000 or declare Bitcoin a strategic reserve asset and watch its price rocket. People would ask questions, voters would panic, markets would rebel. But in the middle of a national emergency, when commentators are screaming about default, pension risk, and market contagion, suddenly extreme moves look like responsible leadership. Emergency powers get invoked, late-night meetings at the Fed and Treasury turn into Sunday announcement press conferences. What would have been unthinkable becomes the only way to restore confidence. That's how you get a gold and Bitcoin revaluation without riots. Wrap it in fear, wrap it in urgency, sell it as saving the system. And in the chaos of 2026, 2027, it won't feel like a choice being offered to the public. It will feel like a rescue being done to them. When a country rewrites the value of its money, it doesn't just fix numbers on a screen. It redraws the entire map of who wins and who loses. And in America's coming reset, that line will be brutal. On one side are the winners. The government walks away lighter, its impossible debt suddenly smaller in real terms because gold and Bitcoin on its books are worth far more. Asset holders, people with stocks, real estate, hard assets, early crypto positions, watch the nominal value of what they own explode. Foreign countries that quietly stacked gold for years suddenly look genius. Their reserves surge while the dollar quietly bleeds. On the other side are the losers. Dollar savers, retirees who did everything right, trusting bank accounts, bonds, and pensions. Workers with 400 wonks full of paper promises tied to a currency being hollowed out on purpose. They don't get an announcement saying, "We're honestly Megan taking from you." They just wake up in a world where their money buys less each year, and no one can ever explain where it all went. That's the real magic trick of inflation. It feels like life getting more expensive, not like a bill being collected. But that's exactly what it is, an invisible tax. Instead of raising taxes directly and facing backlash, the system lets prices rise and lets your purchasing power fall. The debt stays on the books, but the value of what it's owed in keeps shrinking. In that quiet transfer, the nation's debt gets paid not with honesty, not with open sacrifice, but with the slow erosion of ordinary people's savings. The reset doesn't just rebalance a spreadsheet. It decides whose future was protected and whose was quietly sold to keep the game going a little longer. If everything you've just heard is true, the goal isn't to panic, it's to stop being the one person at the table who doesn't know the rules of the game. Because the reset that's coming isn't designed to protect you, it's designed to protect the system. That means you can't think like a passive saver anymore, the person who just stacks dollars in a bank account and hopes everything goes back to normal. In a world where the debt is too big and the fix is devaluation, staying all in on dollar promises is like standing still on a floor that's slowly collapsing. So what do you actually do? You start by reducing how much of your future depends on dollar-denominated paper. That doesn't mean betting everything on some risky coin or random stock. It means understanding that cash, bonds, and fixed promises become the easiest targets when inflation is the tool being used to erase debt. You begin shifting little by little toward things that can't be printed. Real assets, productive businesses, land, precious metals. Carefully chosen exposure to crypto if you actually understand the risk. Not lottery tickets, lifeboats. You also look beyond one flag. For decades, the dollar was the unquestioned center of global finance. But the world is slowly moving toward a multipolar system where value flows through many channels, not just one. That's where international diversification matters, spreading risk across currencies, countries, and systems so you're not chained to a single point of failure. And finally, you work on the one asset no government can inflate or confiscate with a policy announcement: your understanding. Most people will ride this reset blind, blaming greed or bad luck as their purchasing power quietly drains away. You don't have to be one of them. The reset will protect the structure that created the problem. It won't protect the people living inside it. Seeing the architecture of the game before the rules get rewritten is the first step to making sure your story doesn't end where the system wants it to.